This time look at 5 motorcycle races that crossed over into the world of cars, making it all the way to Formula 1. Many motorcycle races have tried, but few actually make it as far as Formula 1, and fewer still are really successful at it, and only one has been a world champion in both disciplines. Tazio Nuvolari. Born in 1892, Tazio was the big star of Formula 1 in the 1930s. Working as an ambulance driver after the war, he took up motorcycle racing in 1920 and was even European champion in the 350 class in 1925. His active years in motorcycling were between 1920 and 1929, scoring a number of wins in the 350 class for Bianchi, including 4 wins in the nation's Grand Prix, including a famous one at Monza in 1925, just 5 days after receiving severe injuries whilst driving an Alfa Romeo Formula 1 car. For 1930, he decided to concentrate his efforts on 4 wheels, winning the RAC Tourist Trophy and the Mille Miglia for Alfa Romeo. This persuaded him to make the decision to stop motorcycle racing altogether, and would go on to win the Italian Grand Prix and the Targa Florio that year. In 1932, driving again for Alfa Romeo, he would take 2 wins and a 2nd place, enough to give him the European Formula 1 Championship. And he would also take a win in Monaco, not a championship race back then, as well as repeating his victory from the year before at the Targa Florio. Between 33 and 37, he would go on to drive for Scuderia Ferrari and Maserati, but unfortunately by the mid-30s the Italian cars were simply not competitive against the might of the German cars from Auto Union and Mercedes-Benz. But in 1935 would come the greatest win of his career, when he beat the Auto Unions and Mercedes at the German Grand Prix, despite giving away more than 100 horsepower. He began 1938 driving for Alfa Romeo, but following a ruptured fuel tank at Po announced his retirement. But then came the call from Auto Union. Tazio was able to take full advantage of the Auto Union's performance, taking Grand Prix wins at Monza and Donington Park, with his final win for them coming at the Belgrade Grand Prix in 1939, on the eve of World War II. Post-war, although now in his 50s, he would take a Grand Prix win at Albi in 1946. He would compete in 47 and 48, but his age and the general poor state of his health forced him into retirement in 1950. He would die following a stroke just 2 years later. Jacky Ickx. Born in Brussels, Belgium in 1945, Ickx began his career in motorcycle road racing as well as trials. In trials he would win national and international competitions, and on the roads would find success as an endurance racer, including at the Bol d'Or during the 1960s. In the mid-60s he started to do touring car racing before moving on to Formula 2 and eventually Formula 1. In 1968 he signed for Ferrari, taking his maiden Grand Prix win that year at the French Grand Prix. In '69, driving for Brabham, he would take a number of Grand Prix wins and finish a runner-up in the World Championship, a feat he would emulate the following year in 1970, now driving for Ferrari again. But by the early 70s the Ferrari was becoming increasingly uncompetitive, although there would be wins in Holland in '71 and at the German Grand Prix in 1972. He would leave Ferrari in 1973, and there would be brief stints at Williams, McLaren, Lotus, Wolf, Ensign and Ligier at the end of his career, all without much success. Today, however, Ickx is best known for his success in endurance racing, taking victory at the 24 Hours of Le Mans on 6 occasions, as well as wins at the 12 Hours of Sebring and the 24 Hours at Daytona, taking the World Endurance title in 1982 and 1983, before finally hanging up his gloves in 1985. Mike Hailwood, aka Mike the Bike. Hailwood is regarded as Britain's greatest ever motorcycle racer. He came to public attention in 1961, taking 3 TT wins in a week, for Honda in the 125 and 250 classes, as well as a stunning victory in the 500 class on a Manx Norton. Unsurprisingly, in 1962 MV Augusta came a-calling, and it was with MV that he won 4 consecutive 500cc world titles. In 1966 he signed for Honda once again, winning 4 back-to-back world titles in 66 and 67 in the 250 and 350cc categories. But perhaps his best remembered victory came in the 1967 Isle of Man TT, where he beat MV-mounted Giacomo Agostini in the senior TT. But unfortunately at the end of the season, Honda withdrew from Grand Prix racing. Hailwood would continue, but without competitive machinery, he decided to concentrate on cars from 1969 onwards. Hailwood had done the occasional car race throughout the 60s, but in 69 he would take it more seriously, finishing third in the Le Mans 24 Hours in 1969. But as early as 1963 he was already taking part in Formula 1 Grand Prix and would finish on the podium on 2 occasions. But unfortunately a Formula 1 Grand Prix victory eluded him. He did come mighty close, however. At the Italian Grand Prix in 1969 he was involved in the closest finish in Grand Prix history, finishing just 0.18 of a second behind winner Peter Geffen. Although so close was the race, he was actually 4th. He would, however, win the European Formula 2 Championship in 1972 and have some success in Formula 5000 racing. By 73 he was driving for McLaren, but would retire from Formula 1 after suffering severe injuries at the 1974 German Grand Prix at Nuremberg. However, in 1978, at the age of 38, he returned to the TT, taking a surprise victory for Ducati before returning in 1979 to win his 14th and final TT race, the Senior, on the Suzuki RG500, after which he finally retired from motorcycle racing. Tragically, just 2 years later, he would die in a road traffic collision caused by a truck making an illegal U-turn near his home in Warwickshire. Damon Hill. Born in 1960, Damon Hill is of course the son of 2-time Formula 1 champion and all-round playboy Graham Hill. During his youth, Damon had taken part in trials, but the death of his father left the family with considerable debt. So Damon worked as a courier rider in London for a time, before taking up motorcycle racing in 1981. And while there would be some early successes, he did win the 350cc Clubman's Championship at Brands Hatch on a TZ350. Damon struggled for finances, even working as a labourer on a building site to help finance his racing career. There would be some support from the dispatch riding company he worked for, but Hill struggled to find sponsorship, and he soon found that as a son of a famous Formula 1 driver, it would be much easier to find sponsorship if he raced on 4 wheels. And so in 1984 he took part in Formula Ford racing. During 91 he would work as a test driver for Williams, but would get his break driving the uncompetitive Brabham in 1992. In 1993 Hill was a surprise choice as Prost team number 2 at the Williams team, and after a tough start to the season he would eventually improve, taking his first victory at the Hungarian Grand Prix, making history as the first son of a Grand Prix winner to win a Grand Prix himself. 1994 would see Senna join the team, but he would tragically be killed at San Marino. And it was in this season that Hill showed real character, almost taking the Formula 1 World Championship had it not been for some very questionable driving by Michael Schumacher. In 1995 he would again finish runner-up to Schumacher, before finally taking the world title in 1996. 1997 shockingly would see Hill at Arrows, where he almost took a stunning victory at the Hungarian Grand Prix, possibly the greatest drive of his career. He would end his career at the Jordan team, for whom he would also score Grand Prix victories. John Surtees. John Surtees was born in Surrey, England in 1934. As a young man he was apprenticed at Vincent HRD and would start his racing career on board one of their Grey Flash 500s at the tender age of 16, and by 1952 he had taken part in his first Grand Prix. He was given a factory-supported ride by Norton. However, by 1956, with Norton already in financial trouble, he signed for MV Agusta, for whom he would win 7 world championships, including 4 in the 500 class. But while still racing Grand Prix bikes in the mid-50s, he was already taking part in sports car races for Aston Martin. And so in 1960, at the age of just 26, Surtees, who was still the 500cc Grand Prix world champion, switched to Formula 1. He drove for Lotus at the 1960 British Grand Prix, and in what was only his second Formula 1 Grand Prix, he would finish in second place. And after a number of impressive drives to smaller British teams, in 1963 he was signed by Ferrari, for whom he would win the Formula 1 world title in 1964. The 1966 season started well for Surtees, who was leading the world title, but following a major row with Enzo Ferrari, due to Surtees being omitted from the 24-hour Le Mans team, he walked out. Surtees completed the season driving a Cooper Maserati, winning the last race of the season, but narrowly missing out on the world title. For 1966, Surtees signed for Honda, taking a win at the Italian Grand Prix and finishing 4th in the championship overall. In 1970, Surtees started his own team, and although he himself would retire in 1972, he would win the European Championship with Mike Hailwood at the wheel in Formula 2. The team would eventually be disbanded in 1978. Surtees would go on to be very much the elder statesman of British motorcycle racing, finally passing away at the age of 83 in 2017. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.